Hello everyone, and welcome back to You Can Gourmet with Smoked Brisket. Okay, now this video we're going to do something a little different. Usually what we've done in the past is there's a rolling video of ingredients and the technique we use, etc. With smoking a brisket, there's so much downtime. When you consider an hour and a half per pound of meat, we're using a lot of time just watching a fire, watching smoke, keeping an eye on our temperature to make sure it doesn't get too hot or too cold. And there's no need to have so much rolling video of that. So what we're going to do is we're just going to look at the different stages of smoking a brisket. Now what you see here is one of my favorite toys in my yard. It's my offset smoker, also known as a stick burner. Some guys have a pellet smoker. That's fine if it works for them. For me, I prefer to go more old-fashioned and burn wood as opposed to programming something and just kind of let it go on its own. You'll notice again it's an offset smoker, meaning that the fire is offset from the cooking chamber, and the smoking process is just that. The fire will be built in the firebox, smoke will travel through the cooker and out through the exhaust. Now what I've done here is I started a small fire in my chimney starter using lump charcoal. I don't like the charcoal briquettes, the easy light, easy fire. I don't like to use lighter fluid or anything like that. That's again just charcoal briquettes, and we're going to use that not for the cooking process but to get our fire started. We'll be cooking with post oak, and I used about 2 yards of post oak, and that you can find really just about anywhere. Your grocery stores, your hardware stores, outdoor sporting goods stores. It's not hard to find. Now while my fire was going, I decided to start working on my brisket. This is a whole brisket, also known as a packer cut. This one was just under 13 pounds, and it requires a little bit of trimming of the fat cap. I like between 1/4 and 1/2 inch fat on it. I think that keeps it nice and moist, especially on the point that I'm pointing at there. See what I did there? There's a point and a flat on a brisket. Anyway, that's going to be exposed to the heat a little bit more, so that's where we want a little bit more of our fat. You'll also see that I've made some cuts into the flat or the thinner part of the brisket, and that's to let me know the direction of the grain so I can cut against it. Once this brisket cooks down, it's easy to lose sight of that grain until you start cutting into it. So I give myself kind of a head start or a reminder of the direction of the grain before I start cooking it. Okay, and this is the lean side of the brisket, and as you can see there's not nearly as much fat. However, it will expose the decal. The decal is that huge chunk of fat that's not going to cook down at all. It's very well protected, and trim that out of there. Be careful when you cut it out though as to not take any of the meat with it, and you'll have a big hunk of fat right there in your hand. Just get rid of it. Okay, now that we've done all the trimming we're going to do, it's time to get to the really difficult stuff. Gotta season it. And this is 1-to-1 ratio of salt and pepper. No garlic powder, no onion powder, no mustard rub, none of that stuff. Texas brisket, right? So Texas, we like salt, we like pepper, and it really lets the flavor of that brisket stand up on its own. So put as much or as little as you'd like. Keep in mind it's a big piece of meat, so it can take a lot of salt and pepper. I like to see a good deal of pepper on it, so that's what I've done. Now with our meat seasoned, trimmed, let's take a look at our fire. We want it right around 250 or so, and it'll fluctuate a little bit between 225, 280. You just don't want it to bounce around too much. And even if it does spike up on you a little bit, just keep an eye on it, try to bring it back down. And you definitely don't want your fire to die out, because then you're just going to have to start all over again, and it's not good for anybody. So now that our fire is ready, we hit that perfect temperature of 250, put the brisket on, and we're off to the races. And as you see, I've got a water pan in the back. Smoking is a dry heat so that water pan will help keep the meat retain some of its moisture. And I've also improvised with a digital thermometer. I just want to have a better idea of what my fire is doing. I've never really done that before, but I wanted to get an idea of my temperature away from the meat and not just where the thermostat is. Now, with the meat on, go ahead and close off your cooker, keep an eye on your fire, keep an eye on your smoke, and try your hardest not to peek. Leave that cooker closed unless you absolutely have to open it. What we want is a nice thin, air quotations, blue smoke, the elusive blue smoke everybody always talks about. You don't want these big billowing clouds of smoke coming out. That'll make your meat taste very acrid and overpowered by smoke. Nobody really likes that. And just let it go. After about 6 hours, my brisket looked like this. And you may notice some fat starting to pool in on the flat end of it. That's perfectly fine. I decided to pull it, went ahead and wrapped it in some butcher paper. I don't like to use aluminum foil. I think that it's unorthodox to do so, also known as a Texas crutch. Now, if you're running out of time, you got people showing up, or your brisket is drying up on you, then by all means wrap it in aluminum foil if you have to. Otherwise, if you're running a nice clean fire, you can go the whole cook without wrapping it at all. This is my end result after 7 more hours of low and slow cooking at about 250. This is what we have. I went ahead and pulled it off the smoker, let it rest. It's very important that you allow your brisket to rest after you pull it. I know it's hard to resist, but don't cut into it. All those juices are trying to redistribute throughout the meat. As the heat hits the exterior of the meat, those juices really get concentrated in the middle, trying to escape that heat. And what happens if you don't allow those juices to redistribute, once you cut into it, all your potential moisture is going to go ahead and just end up on your cutting board. You're still going to lose some, of course, but nowhere near the amount. And keep in mind with brisket, cut it as you need, because once you start cutting into it, it's inevitable. It starts drying up. So trim off as you need. Go from flat to point. Remember to cut against the grain and enjoy. That's your brisket. You can gourmet.